take a look at the changing nature of public policy. Many people regard public policies as deliberate responses to purposeful actions to alleviate problems and needs systematically identified by some legitimate means. Public policy is an organizing framework of rationales for government programs that deal with specified societal problems. It's commonly assumed that government policies are intended to solve, or at least cope with, major social and economic problems. Let's consider some of the most common popular assumptions about government policy. First, some people believe that governments have clearly defined policies, well thought out in advance, or on all or major issues of problems. Second, many believe these policies are established through some kind of rational choice of better as opposed to worse alternatives made by political leaders. Third, some think everything that is done to address a problem or issues follows these policies. Fourth, it's often assumed that policies of government are clearly perceived and understood by citizens. And fifth, many believe that government policies are widely agreed on and supported, otherwise, how could they remain in force? Public policies are generally not clearly defined in the sense that all major problems are anticipated and the machinery of government geared up to meet them before they become unmanageable. Some processes designed to foresee future developments and prepare for them have not accomplished all that they were intended to, and circumstances beyond the control often prevail. As a practical matter, governments could not possibly have predetermined policies on all issues, especially accidents, natural disasters such as earthquakes, floods, and hurricanes, as well as deliberate acts of terror. Thus, policies are more often the product of responses to particular circumstances or problems rather than the result of deliberate action. Because of the size, diversity, and so on, many government activities do not follow official policy directions or support publicly stated goals. Finally, it's rarely true that there's widespread active support for existing public policies, although most have at least passive backing. It makes a difference which situations are defined as problems, who defines them, and why they deserve attention in a policy area. Symbolic actions are proposals for policy changes that serve some limited political purpose but do not threaten the current situation. Public policies then tend to be haphazard, not widely understood or actively supported, and often inconsistently applied. There's a great variety in the kinds of policies pursued by government entities. These can be distinguished on the basis of their essential rationales, their impact on society, and the respective roles played by administrative agencies in each. Distributive policies deliver large-scale services or benefits to certain individuals or group in the population. Examples are loans and loan guarantees provided by the national government to cover private sector losses. Redistributive policies involve deliberate efforts by the government to shift the allocation of wealth, income, property, or rights among broad classes or groups within the population. Regulatory policies promote restrictions on the freedom to act of those subject to the regulations. Self-regulatory policies or constituent policies represent a variation on regulation in that policy changes are often sought by those being regulated as means of protecting or promoting their own economic interest. Normally, a legislative body enacts a licensing law providing for enforcement by a board dominated by members selected from the licensing group. Bureaucratic agencies play somewhat different roles in each type of policy and even within a given policy category, as this in the case of redistributive policy. Depending on the kind of policy at issue, bureaus and their allies may be more or less involved. Governments may try to create new policy-making environments for a variety of purposes. Some reasons are ideological and intended to shift government programs in the direction of rewarding loyal interest groups. Still others reflect a de-evolutionary approach, shifting policymaking authority from one level of government to another or to facilitate new partnerships with private and nonprofit entities. Those who advocate for less government, more privatization, and outsourcing typically presume that business oriented, market driven alternatives are best because they're less costly, more efficient, and result in better service delivery. Conflicting opinions about the content of policy and the role of the private sector in public policy making also reflect differing definitions of policy, administration, and of management. During its 120-year history, the discipline of public administration has reflected conflicting views about interactions of politics and administration within formal government arrangement. Its most influential thinkers view the relationship as a conflict between political values, such as accountability and responsiveness, and administrative values, such as efficiency and performance. Changing policy priorities and shifts in funding sources have forced many governments to draw one or more operating revenues from trust funds and user fees collected directly from receipts from specific purposes. In many state and local governments, these sources now equal or exceed the amount collected from general tax-based revenue sources such as property and sales tax. All governments, especially those at the local level, recognize the connection between administration and private business market sector. Competing goals of diverse interest groups often force elected officials to reconcile vague and often conflicting demands between those who pay more in taxes and those who receive more public service. Elected politicians, affected interests, contract firms, and agency officials increasingly share common policy-making responsibility. The policy-making process involves multiple demands, conflicts, compromises, and decisions. This is a broad definition for making policy, and it's not exclusive in terms of any one branch or level of government. Policymaking is complex, characterized by a lack of centralized direction, a focus on interactions of foreign, national, state, and local governments, and involvement of private interests with specialized concerns. The policy process is not a smoothly functioning, ongoing sequence with one phase predictably following another. Where administrative agencies play a central role in the policy process, policy making can be described as occurring in four stages. The first is a legislative stage involving both Congress and the President, often agency administrators, which is basic legislation drawn up, considered, and is approved by law. The legislative stage normally centers on actions of the chief executive and key legislators, but the role of higher level administrators in formulating and proposing new policy options is also very important. Administrative involvement in subsequent stages of the policy process can assume a variety of forms. These include rulemaking, adjudication, law enforcement, and program operation. Rulemaking is a quasi-legislative power delegated to agencies by Congress. Rules may serve different functions, elaborating on general statutory provisions or indicating probable agency behavior in particular matters. Adjudication is a quasi-judicial function involving the application of current laws or regulations to particular situations by case-by-case decision-making, such as the FDA's power to seek criminal penalties. Law enforcement refers to securing compliance with existing statutes and rules, and not necessarily to police functions, and more specifically to the enthusiasm an agency brings to the task of implementing legislative authorizations. Many facets of program funding and administration are closely tied to either intergovernmental collaboration or competition. An absence of centralized direction characterizes many phases of policymaking, producing policies that look, accurately enough, as though they were arrived at from many directions at once. It's clear that the word policy refers to intentions and symbols as well as actual results of government activity. Policies are put into effect only to the degree that program objectives related to them are met. Just as governmental and political goals need to be clearly defined, individual program or project goals do also. Planning and analysis, even though they're carried out imperfectly much of the time, are essential elements of the goal definition process. Planning and analysis is the process of deliberately defining and choosing the operational goals of an organization. All organizations function according to some type of basic plans, but program administrators must promote planning by others in their organization and weave plans together into a common purpose. Complicating the planning process is the fact that goals exist at different conceptual levels within any public agency or organization. An operational goal, for example, is the achievement of a certain minimal reading level for every American. One plan for achieving this operational goal includes educational assistance to urban high-risk areas. Administrators at all levels of bureaucracy must operate within this complex web of objectives and arrangements and successfully organize activities addressed to meeting the goals of the administrative unit. Public managers are encouraged to use strategic planning to determine a course of action, beginning with preliminary consideration of goals. Goals must be arrived at in deliberate fashion and can reflect varying combinations of administrative and political judgments. Planning leads directly to processes of analysis, of examining alternative options and attempting to identify and compare potential outcomes. The purpose of analysis is to facilitate sound decisions by establishing relevant facts about a situation before attempting to change it in some way and by determining, if possible, the respective consequences of different courses of action. Policy analysis is defined as the systematic investigation of alternative policy options and the assembly and integration of the evidence for and against each option. A key emphasis on explaining the nature of problems and how policies address those problems are put into effect. The systems analysis approach is usable for integrating how all elements of political, social, economic, or administrative systems might affect and be affected by a given project or program. Perhaps the greatest advantage of systems analysis is its potential for bringing some order in decision making out of confusion and discord often prevalent in policy processes as well as in society at large. Cost benefit analysis is the most frequently used methodology for designing and measuring relative gains and losses resulting from alternative policy or program options. Operations research, OR, actually represents a collection of specific decision-making techniques using systems theory, modeling, and quantitative methods to ascertain how to best utilize available resources. After policy choices have been made, OR makes the use of mathematical techniques such as linear programming for research and optimal solution. Analysis greatly emphasizes a manager's ability to organize and apply relevant information while choosing desirable program options. Program implementation is a general political and government process of carrying out programs in order to fulfill specified policy objectives. A concerted effort is required to manage minimal aspects of program implementation. Until the mid-20th century, it was apparently assumed that once a program was in place, with adequate funding and political support, actually administering the program followed routinely. Program evaluation and review technique, PERT, is a management technique of program implementation in which a sequence of steps for carrying out a project or program is mapped out in advance. Critical path method, CPM, is a management approach to program implementation in which a manager attempts to assess the resource needs of different paths of action. Management by objectives, known as MBO, is another management technique designed to facilitate goal setting, resource allocation, monitoring progress towards goals, and evaluating results. Despite the availability of numerous approaches to implementation, problems common to many managerial situations persist. Managerial control involves management's ability to secure subordinates' cooperation in program activities and the agency's ability to cope with specific situations and with the surrounding environment. Related to management control is the challenge of developing harmonious, productive, and beneficial working relationships within an agency. Of central importance are vertical, leader and follower, and horizontal, teamwork and peer group relationships in all of their forms. Program evaluation is a central concern to virtually all administrative policy makers, most political executives, legislatures, and the public. The purposes include our learning about a program's operation and effects, the definition of accountability of those responsible for implementation, and to influence the political environment. Program evaluation is the systematic evaluation of government actions, policies, or programs to determine their success or failure. Most agency managers fail to take full advantage of these possibilities by beginning their evaluation programs too late or assigning evaluation responsibilities to staff members who lack the requisite skills. The most important preconditions are an understanding of the problem the program is meant to address and clarity of the goals that the program or policy was designed to achieve. Steps to be taken in an evaluation include at least the following. First, there's a specification of what needs to be evaluated, regardless of how narrow and precise or broad and diffuse the object of evaluation is. The second step is measurement of the object of evaluation by collecting data that demonstrates the performance and effect of the program or policy. The third step is analysis, which can vary in the rigor or to which it's carried out. In order to make a rational evaluation of program or policy effectiveness, a clear cause and effect relationship has to be established between agency actions and demonstrated impacts on societal problems. Program evaluation is a complex task involving several possible research designs. It is important to tailor a design to a particular program being evaluated so the results can be relied on. Before versus after studies, evaluation and comparison of results before and after program implementation to determine what results, if any, were achieved. Time trend projection is a comparison of pre-program data on actual post-program data. Many evaluation techniques compared are planned versus actual performance and measure post-program data against target sets in prior years, whether before or during program implementation. Controlled experimentation involves comparisons of two groups of similar people, one surveyed by the program and the other the control group not served or served differently. If the purpose of evaluation is to assess program performance and accomplishment objectively, it's evident that numerous difficulties are involved. A central problem in evaluating public programs is considerable uncertainty about the reliability of performance indicators. Another dimension of the problem or of performance indicators is the fact that some data can often be manipulated and interpreted in different ways to produce different results. One other problem is the time frame in which programs operate and how much time is required before a meaningful appraisal of program results can be made. Concentrated and effective political support for or against a proven program can render evaluations of the program virtually irrelevant, whether those evaluations are favorable or unfavorable. Government Accountability Office, GAO, is an investigative arm of Congress that helps with these evaluation issues.